Yeah, good morning, my friend, my fellow brigaders. This is, what is this? This is day 17 of the RPG Brigade's 31-day challenge for August of 2017. We are over hump day, excuse me. It is about 7:15 in the morning, Iowa time. I have to be working about an hour and 20 minutes. Technically, I'm parked at work right now. We just got here early. I don't know about some folks, but I go to bed and I get up and I'm hardwired to get up at certain times anymore and have to get so much sleep. I just lay there and it becomes annoying. And so, what better time to get up and share some thoughts and opinions and ideas with my fellow gaming enthusiasts, my fellow hobbyists, my fellow brigaders. Like I said, I've gone through some of these questions and I ponder them and I think, well, some I fire right off at the hip without giving too much effort and thought to it because it's kind of a no-brainer. Then there's others where I think, yeah, maybe a little bit more go into this, and then there's some that I go, didn't we just cover this? Isn't this just a different version of an earlier question? Just questioning, right? My opinion, just my opinion. Anyway. Question 17. Which RPG have you owned the longest but not played? Which have you owned the longest and not played? Well, I had to think about that for a moment because I actually have a couple game systems that are not game systems that I've owned longer. They are supplement systems that go to another set of mechanics, or can be played in a number of set of mechanics, but it's a world, right? Judges Guild is one of my earliest ones, aside from the Dungeons and Dragons, things like Gamma World, and Space Opera, which I've all played and I covered briefly in one blog or another. Judges Guild is the oldest that I've not uh, played as a game because there's no mechanic rules for Judges Guild that I'm aware of. It was designed to be overlaid as a world setting onto existing game systems. It didn't the mechanics from Tunnels and Trolls, Swords and Sorcery, Dungeons and Dragons, Rollmaster didn't matter. That's the nature of those things. So I looked at my shelf as we went out to the shed the other day, and I said, and I know I've brought it up before. This one is Twilight 2000, which sadly enough, the date's no longer valid because it's well past 2000 and none of these events took place. This was produced by Game Designers Workshop, came out in late 80s. I want to say it came out as a box set. I do not remember what I paid for the box set. And sadly enough, the box itself did not survive the trials of time. Yeah, 1984, the year before I graduated from high school. There you go. That's how old the fat man is. Hmm. This also actually would cover another question. If you go back to question 21 coming up, what RPGs do the most with the least amount of words? Well, here will be my entry for that one, and I'll ramble on about it when we get to it. As common in these early game systems, the rules are pretty thin. I mean, look how thin these are. Here's my play manual, the player's handbook, and the referee manual. Your GM guide, your handbook. Very little to it. And yet they cover a lot of material. They cover and touch on a lot of things that would be pertinent to basically what is a post-apocalyptic scenario or situation. The scenario here being, or the premise being here, that you and your party are part of a military unit that gets stranded in Poland post World War III. The big boo-ha's gone off. The bombs have fallen. Half of the world's devastated by nuclear destruction and fallout. In the days prior to the bombings, the nuclear holocaust, the armies of NATO and Warsaw went head to head, and most of the world nations that were in conflict flared up, so it didn't matter where you were around the world. It literally bloomed into a World War III in a matter of weeks. Your units were deployed into Poland from Germany or wherever they were based, or they were shipped in from the States prior to the balloon going off, so to speak. And now, with the collapse of most of civilization as we know it, the collapse of the military infrastructure on all sides, the situation is pretty dire and grim. At the end of the day, your goal is go home, get home any way you can. And so you find yourself and your compadres in a very rough and difficult situation. You have access to pretty much all the high grade and heavy equipment that was known to the military, both sides, circa the 80s, and or what they assumed would be available in at the millennia, since this is to 2000 according to the book's premise. So as as a game, it's a cracked game, and yet it's a confusing game for a lot of people. At least it was back then, and not so much now because, like I mentioned in one of my just recent vlogs, our pyramid of games is so large, our field is so broad now that we've covered so many different contingencies that we didn't have covered back in the day. And so when I started buying it, I bought it because the read. I like this kind of stuff. I like post-apocalyptic scenarios. I like the kind of end of the world survival thing. What would you do? How would you live? How would you get by? Could you get by? I look at things like some of these survivor shows and other reality shows that come out on TV where they put people together in this kind of a situation of that. What would you do? Or I see these movies like The Walking Dead and the TV series, and I actually get irate sometimes. I don't want to get off on the tangent on that, my friends, but I do get irate as a nerdy guy, as a trained neo engineer, as that's another story, and as a military buff and enthusiast, I look at some of what they do and I think, what's wrong with you morons? What's wrong with you? You know what? You never see in those guys in those groups, those survival groups. You never see the consummate gaming nerd. You never see those guys that believe this stuff. One of our people who would come in and slap some of these people senseless, going, "What are you thinking? There's zombies, man. There's zombies. There's ways of dealing with zombies, and there's ways of fortifying our hold so they don't get in. But you know what? They ain't the ones that we gotta worry about. It's the other survivors out there. We got to plan for them too, right? Right? Right. I look at all you got to do is go back and look at some of the Mad Max stuff, and uh, here's an old '80s a post-apocalyptic movie. Uh, I'm not sure the actor. I want to say Patrick Swayze. Don't quote me on that. I want to say Patrick Swayze starred in this, but it might not be him. It might be one of those types. Okay, it was called World Gone Wild, and it is a great example of what I'm talking about. Right? It's just you just fortify your best you can, and you do what you can do. But anyway, in this particular scenario, and these guys, I never got an opportunity to find a group of players that were interested. My friends at the time, well, they weren't into this sort of thing. They wanted to play the D&D. They wanted to play, Shadowrun and MechWarrior. They wanted to play, um, oh, Heroes and something or another. And Champions was a huge draw to a couple of my buddies. And so none of them really got into this. And they looked at it and they just poo-pooed it. Wasn't their thing. And I tried to play it at a couple local conventions without a lot of success. I just couldn't get a draw because a lot of people didn't get it. They didn't see the the potential here. And they looked a lot of, and sadly, there's also this, I don't know. Now this is more common today than it was 30 years ago, but a lot of players will take a look at how thin, how little source materials here, and well, we can't play a good game than that. If we don't have 20 books that are this thick and we hadn't paid $500 for, you know, come on. You know a few of those people. You might be a few of those people. You might be a little prejudiced yourself when it comes to this game or that game. I'm guilty of that, right? I'm prejudiced sometimes out of ignorance, sometimes just because envy. I envy the guys that can afford to have that stuff, and I don't get to play it. But I don't. That's not equal because there's a number of game systems I'd love to have, and I'd love to play or run, and I don't. Even though I don't have the finances for it, at some point I will figure out something. And yes, I could have a plethora of PDFs piling up in one of my discs or in one of my thumb drives, but I haven't got to that point yet. I've only downloaded one, and that's because I needed some reference material for one of my vlogs. I'd like to have a copy of Masquerade, Vampire the Masquerade, but I'd like to have a number of the source books to go with it. So now we're talking investing in hundreds of dollars worth of material, which I can't justify doing at the moment. So my pick was this game system, and it's a good game system, and it's a misunderstood, much maligned game system that doesn't see a lot of traffic, doesn't see a lot of trade now, which is ironic because when they produced it, when GDW produced it, well, the first supplement or adventure module, if you will, and I use the term loosely because it's kind of a combination that came out the same time the box set did, was the Free City of Krakow. And as you can see, nicely covered graphic uh, cover. The reason they didn't put all the fancy graphics and artwork in these is because, well, the box set had the graphics and the money. You just didn't, fluff these things out. If you take a look at some of your core books, some of your source books now, this is one of the reasons that make them a good read, a nice read to sit down and just read for the sake of a book, right? They're full of story and fluff and filler and stuff that, while we know the nuances of how to do a specific set of skills, they go and expand on it. So instead of where this kind of game system has a very small entry, but everybody understands the concept of climb or mechanics, where we're working on vehicles, a lot of the more elaborate systems will give you a more in-depth description, which is 90% BS. It's not. It's just words to fill space to make a bigger book so they can charge more and sell more. All right, anyway, so like I said, Free City, and they came out with I got 20, 25 of these things sitting on a shelf, at least a section of my shelf about yay big, and considering how thin most all these are, that's quite a few. And what is it? Well, sometimes they list the prices on these things and sometimes they don't. And I'd have to say the average was 15 bucks for these things when they first came out. I don't know that for sure. This particular one came out in 1985. So the box set came out at probably Christmas time of 84, and this came out right shortly after Christmas, because you always need to have this sort of material. But we go into storylines and stuff. This is where the storyline's at. It talks about this particular group. Even got dialogue here. The lieutenant, Operation Reset, the decision, blah blah blah. It gives you better understanding how your unit got stuck in Poland while you're near Krakow. Then the dissolution or disintegration of the military units of the time, and the locals fortifying themselves to look after themselves, and now you and them and everybody else have got to deal with it. And of course, we got our city map and detailed information of the of Krakow itself. So there's places and interactions. We can spend. See, there's your good city map right there. Your group is going to have to get fuel and ammo and deal with the locals, which, if you think about it, you're in Poland, you're an Eastern Bloc nation at that time. There's unfriendly to you to begin with, and then most of you don't speak their language, right? So we got our bios for some of the locals, some of the surviving citizens, some of the, people from the other side of the other militaries that we were dealing with, and what you're going to do and how you're going to cope with it. They give you some ideas and guidelines. So there's a lot of material for playing some really good RPG, some really good role playings here. But what we don't have, we don't have aliens, we don't have spaceships, we don't have magic, we don't have gods and spells, and we lack a lot of that stuff. So they make up for it. This is the war historian RPG, if you will. This is the war gamer guy that wants to RPG but doesn't want to get tied up into one of the big, one of these big, foofy, flashy lightning bolt firing from your fingertip kind of thing. No, they want to have a cannon that fires lightning and thunder, right? And Twilight 2000 provides you with that game system. Okay. And as typical for me, I'm running into well over 15 minutes. I try hard to keep these things under 10 minutes, and I almost always fail. What do you do? Anyway, there you have my answer for question 17. Which RPG have you owned the longest but not played?